There's a term that's come into more and more common usage about experiences such as the ones that I've had since I was a child, and calling them, rather than supernatural or paranormal, to call them supernormal. In other words, they're an expanded sense of awareness, and yet they are part of that normal spectrum, because they're attributes, they're phenomena, they're attributes of who we really are. So this will include what I refer to as our superpower, which most people sort of just say, oh yes, but it really is a superpower, which is intuition.
Today we welcome Dr. Jude Currivan, a cosmologist, futurist, and visionary whose research bridges leading-edge science with ancient wisdom. Through books like The Cosmic Hologram and The Story of Gaia, she reveals a universe that is conscious, interconnected, and profoundly intelligent. Her insights invite us to see ourselves not as separate observers, but as active participants in a living, evolving cosmos. Dr. Currivan's work opens the door to a deeper understanding of reality, one rooted in unity, coherence, and the power of awareness. I'm honored to share her perspective with you today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Currivan.
Rhonda, it's my great delight. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. So my first question is that you had a memory quite early on that something was a little bit more than your normal existence. Would you like to talk about that?
Well, it does depend on what you call
reality.
As I was about to say, yes, exactly. It depends on how you define normal. What I'm finding, and I'm very grateful for, is that over the last couple of decades, 2 to 3 decades, there's a term that's come into more and more common usage about experiences such as the ones that I've had since I was a child, and calling them, rather than supernatural or paranormal, to call them supernormal. In other words, they're an expanded sense of awareness, and yet they are part of that normal spectrum, because they're attributes, they're phenomena, and they're attributes of who we really are. So this will include what I refer to as our superpower, which most people sort of just say, oh yes, but it really is a superpower, which is intuition, because, you know, our current framework of the nature of reality as purely material and made up of separate objects can't account for intuition. And then the other sort of attributes, such as, you know, telepathy and precognition and remote viewing, and as I also have experienced out-of-body experiences, and my consciousness has continued to be aware, although I'm not actually realizing I'm within my body as such. All of those have no place within that prevailing paradigm of materiality and separation. And yet we're finding leading edge science now is discovering at all scales of existence, and it's converging with universal wisdom traditions, that these attributes, these phenomena, these are our natural way of being. And so we can certainly explore that. But this has been my life experience since I was very young.
Mm-hmm. Well, and ancient man, I mean, we had to have been aware of our surroundings. We had to, because, you know, we were probably quite delicious to some of the animals that were around. And so we had to really expand our awareness and know and hear things, acute hearing, acute seeing, acute awareness. And in that way, sort of we have an energy around us that's a touchy-feely sort of feeling about those things. I love when you talk about things like intuition and all of that, because I think most people have it. And I think that some people, do you agree with this, is we can also develop it and make it more available to us?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I would say that's the case pretty much of all of the attributes that I've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We've tended, as we've gone through this journey of greater and greater perception of our individuality, as it were, which is great. I'm not blaming or shaming that journey for a moment. But part of that journey has meant that, in many ways, we've closed our eyes and we've closed down our ears to this greater level of sensitivity and awareness, which isn't just being able to hear and see at more sort of nuanced ways, but actually beyond what we might think of as the physical senses, such as intuition, where we can have intuitive insights that are not bounded by our notions of space and time, where we can have a telepathic connection that is not bounded by our notion of space and time. So I think there are many levels to this, and I agree with you that now it seems to me we're in a position where we've undergone this journey of individuation. We've got to a point where we do realize that each of us is unique, and yet we're realizing and remembering that we are inseparable from each other and the whole world. So now awakening to these attributes that have been part of our journey from the get-go, that are part of a universal journey, not just of human beings, but is part of a universe that is profoundly interconnected and interdependent, and literally exists meaningfully and evolves purposely as what I refer to as a unitive whole, where its unity is expressed in diversity, but nothing is separate from anything else. Everything is part of that interconnected, interdependent relationship of wholeness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very interesting. And, it makes sense to me because I go to pick up the phone and then somebody has called me and it's the person I was going to reach out to and call.
Yes.
So, I mean, that really gets down to a personal level. But if that is possible, then what you're speaking about makes so much sense.
Exactly. And it's not just possible. There's huge amounts, not just of anecdotal stories, but evidence. And what you're referring to is something that Carl Jung calls synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. And the prevailing paradigm, this sort of mechanistic paradigm or worldview of separation and materiality has no place for any of this. And yet all that we're sharing, all that we're exploring is naturally experienced within this emerging understanding that's converging with universal wisdom teachings, spirituality based and indigenous traditions. And synchronicities are just so much, in my experience, they're so much fun because when we attend to them and say, oh my goodness, they're like little beautiful little seeds of possibility that, of open adventures, in my experience, open adventures. So yes, if we honor that intuition is innately our superpower, if we say yes to the possibility and potential of synchronicities in our life, oh, Rhonda, it's, as you say, from your experience, I'd love to hear more of your experiences. It's such an adventure. It's so wondrous and wonderful, and opens up this experience of life in such an extraordinary, beautiful way.
Mm-hmm. And when a person is younger, well, myself and people that I've spoken to, it's easy to ignore those sort of insights or, warnings. They can actually be warnings. And
They can be.
Aside, because not a lot of people, when I was growing up, even spoke of that. It's something that you never talked about. And so I find that it's so good right now for humanity that you're speaking about this, and there's a whole rise in human consciousness, as you're speaking about, that's going to help us to our next evolution.
I hope so, and I trust so. And it does feel that the timing is right because, going back to what we're discussing about our journey over the last few thousand years, and certainly over the last few hundred years, has been progressively founded on a worldview of separation. And, you know, by the end of the 19th century or the middle 19th century, it was a very mechanistic worldview of objects being separate from each other. But it was essentially a world without meaning and purpose. And for millennia, thousands of years before this point, as human beings, we share stories and we've told stories that are about meaning and purpose, who we are, why we are, how we are. And sure, as we've learned more and discovered more, those stories have moved forward. But it seems to me that the last period of time, we've told stories that have taken away the magic, the mystery, the meaning, the purpose of what it means to be human. And, you know, we've done it and we've made progress and we've gone through this continued journey of individuality, but it's brought us to this point of unsustainability because its worldview is one where extraction, exploitation, hierarchies, inequities, injustices, you know, are almost a natural way of behaving in a world of separation and without meaning and purpose. And we've now come to a point where that view, that worldview, is no longer able to be sustained. And even more importantly, it's wrong. We're discovering the evidence that is turning it on its head and showing it's profoundly mistaken. And this is why I feel this time is so pivotal, so momentous, because we can go on to live our lives and to see a world through this lens of separation, or we can realize we can literally wake up. We can literally open our eyes and our ears and the ears of our heart and the eyes of our heart, not just our minds, but to the evidence that we are unique and yet we are inseparable from the whole world and from each other.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. Going back to you personally, how do you feel that it guided your journey? I find that people are very interested in knowing, how did you get from where you were to where you began to where you are today? And I think that it's encouraging. I mean, you've done so many things with your life, and people think, oh, well, that was just easy. And, you know, and so we don't realize that we all have challenges. And also, when did you know that you were on this course that you ended up on to today?
Well, there are a number of questions in that, so
Yes,
I'll
I
try and
know. I'm
respond.
sorry.
And no worries, absolutely no
I
worries.
can't
I'll
wait till
try
you
and
tell us.
I think probably possibly responding to the last point first. There's an amazing philosopher, Danish philosopher called Kierkegaard, and he talked about we experience life forwards and we understand it backwards. So although my life journey I described as a scenic route because it's had many twists and turns and different aspects to the pathways, and that journey for me was always guided by curiosity. My main word when I was little was why? And it's continued to be my main word. Why is this? Why is that? And then the how. But that journey of discovering curiosity has brought me to this point. It's an ongoing journey. And it's progressively been, as you say, over many years that I've appreciated as I've stood in the here and now, which is where we can only stand really. I have looked back and appreciated the journey that's brought me to those points, but I've never stood there. I've always moved on. And I've never put a huge amount of time, probably until fairly recently, to appreciate just how all of those different pathways have woven together in a tapestry, whether it's honouring ancient wisdom or indigenous teachings or direct experiences all through my life of these supernormal phenomena, leading edge science, being in corporate, in business life for 25 years, doing a PhD, researching ancient cosmologists and understanding how people have seen each other and the wider world over many thousands of years, doing my master's degree in physics at Oxford University. learning to cook thanks to my mum, being a gardener. I mean, all of these threads come together so that I've come to a point now where I can hopefully serve the good of the whole at this point in these really truly pivotal and momentous times. So you ask about my journey, and you made the point about people think it may be easy. Trust me, it has not been. I'm the daughter and granddaughter of coal miners in the north of England. So we grew up in very modest circumstances. And my dad died when I was 10 years old. He was in his early 30s. And my mum then had to bring up my brother and myself as a single mom in a time when there was very little social support. She had to go out to work. She'd been a homemaker until that point, and then had to go out to work. We, from the age of 10, I've worked because, we had to. I had to help mum, and I had to grow up young. And there've been many times in my life where it's been incredibly challenging. And what I would say is two things always kept me going through the darkest of times. One, in my younger years and certainly through to adulthood, was my mother. She was and is, she's passed over, but I still feel her presence with me. She was and is my inspiration. She left school at 14. And she went into factories and in the Second World War. And there's a huge, one day my mum's story should be about a film, because she lived an extraordinary life and a loving life. And she lived life to the full, despite all the incredible challenges that she faced, far more than I've faced. And she always taught me about love. Her mantra was, when anything got dark or difficult or there were choices to be made, it was always about choosing love. And that has stayed with me my whole life. And the other thing she taught me was be true. Be true, be honest, and be truthful. And you may not know all the facts, and you may not have, the ability to say, this is the absolute truth. But always serve truth without owning it. Serve truth without owning it. And so that's also been my guide, my North Star, have been that combination of love and truth. And, despite all the experiences I had, all those amazing experiences, the precognition and the synchronicities you mentioned, and learning to trust them. I think that's the point. When people ask, how did you get here? I learned to trust the universe. I learned to trust that our universe is loving and is truthful. And I don't think I've ever said that before in the way I'm sharing it with you now. Mm-hmm. I trust our universe is truthful at its foundation, and that it is loving at its foundation. And that really has been my pathway and my gratitude all my life. So if I can share some of these stories, some of this way of being, and invite, because it can only be an invitation, it seems to me, invite people to say yes to this invitation in their own lives, in whatever way, mm-hmm. but to come to a appreciation, a deep gratitude of a living, loving, and truthful universe.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's so beautifully put, because many times we may have these inclinations, but maybe the people that are around us, they might have different ideas, and that might sway us, get us off track in our lives. And I've been off track in my life and had a near-death experience that sort of, I've had a couple of them. And what it did, the enlightenment from that, and even though I wouldn't have been able to articulate it at that time, really set me on a course, here we are sitting here today. Yeah. I mean, the long shot of all of this happening is monumental, really. right? That two people
Yeah.
come together, and some of your stories is like my story, and some of our stories are like the people who are watching. And the thing is that when we reflect back on our lives, I think that we can put those pieces together of how we actually got to where we are today. And I really love the conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm loving it too. And you know, I'd love to hear what of your near-death experiences, if we look at the before Rhonda and the after Rhonda, what did that awaken in you? What did realization did you come to?
Thank you for asking. First of all, just such an appreciation for life. One of my near-death experience was an actual T-bone where I could have been killed. But more important, I think, than that, that they were able to get me out of the vehicle with the jaws of life. And I did not have a scratch on me at all, not a scratch. And so then you think, and I actually felt my soul leave my body. And it was just briefly, but that I knew right then that, that I could have died because I scared my soul so bad that it left. Right?
Yes.
But I mean, a lot of people, there's some people, they don't believe they have a soul. This concrete. But when you actually have a chording of the soul, then you know. And I think that's the thing that changed my whole way of thinking. I sort of elevated at that time. My consciousness was a lot higher. And I think that it's a story that a lot of people tell when they've had near-death experience.
But absolutely. And I've actually had the privilege of hearing stories and the experiences such as yours. And what you're sharing is so important. And so and what they also have told me is that because they realize that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, there is no fear of death. There is no fear of death following that near-death experience. When folks come back, there's a realization that our consciousness, our soul continues after the demise of our physical body. So, for a lot of people, death is the greatest fear they have.
Yes.
And I think, for folks who've had near-death experiences and be able to share those stories and realizing that there is nothing to fear about death. One might fear the pain, but we fear pain in life. And, that's just part of life. Yes, that really is part of life. But death itself is really a door into another way of our continued being. And thank you for sharing that, Rhonda, because I think sharing these stories is so important.
It is important because it changes you. And when it changes you, you start making different decisions in your life because fundamentally there's something bigger because you've experienced it. And I think that when you talk about love and all of those emotions, I think that we're deeper because if we have those types of experience, if we don't arrive that way, sometimes we arrive that way. Well, we all arrive that way, I believe. But living and going through all the aches and pains and bumps and bruises of life can really put a barrier up so that you don't let people in, that you don't feel those emotions and those things, which is the true essence of who you are. And, I encourage people, if you want to know who you really are, just start visiting your heart and see how big you can make that. Have you had?
I love that. I love that. And I went through a period of my life when, after my dad died when I was 10, and then I had several disastrous love affairs. And so by my early 20s, even with my mum's amazing inspiration, and obviously I loved her, but I closed my heart down. I closed my heart down because it was too painful. It was too painful. And I went into my head because I was pretty bright and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing myself a favor. I thought I was protecting myself. And I was that way for many years. And I hope, still a kind person, but I didn't really feel the depths of what love can mean. And it was only through, again, life circumstances that I got to a point where I realized that I wasn't actually protecting myself. I was imprisoning myself. I was imprisoning myself. And at that point, that realization came in ways that literally my heart broke open. But it was actually the cage that I put around my heart that broke open, and my heart was free. And it was my choice to put that cage around because I was fearful of what I thought was the pain of love. And, sometimes grief is the price we pay for love, as our beloved Queen Elizabeth told us in COVID, and so I realized that I couldn't live fully unless I was willing to love fully. And I couldn't love fully if I tried to limit myself, if I tried to have that cage either closed or a little bit ajar. And that really changed my life. It wasn't a near-death experience, but it was a near-heart experience. and it just opened. And my life after that, always realizing that, the point about us being spiritual beings, nonetheless really brought me to live and to love my experience as a spiritual being, have a human experience.
And I'm so pleased that you shared that, because we don't realize that we are caged, that we've caged ourselves, caged our heart. To live on earth is we're going to get hurt. We're going to have all these experiences that we wish we didn't have. And that's how we close up our heart. And it's not until we get to a certain point that it starts to break open. And, sometimes it's hopefully not a near-death experience, but sometimes it takes something monumental, and sometimes it's just a realization, like you've talked about, is that in order to get love, you have to give love. And a lot of people can only give at a certain level because they are not open from the heart.
And absolutely. And what I've learned, and what, going back to what Mum was teaching me from a very young age, because she had so many challenges in her life that could have taken her down that closed route, that cage route, and she just refused. She just refused. She loved life, and she loved embracing life. And so while she went through those really challenging and difficult circumstances, and as you have and I have and everybody does, is how do we say, look, these experiences are what brings us to who we are. Yeah. The point is not to hold on to the trauma of those experiences, because without those experiences, we're not here, we're not who we are. But to let go of the traumas, let go of those, those runarounds of abuses and abandonments and betrayals and abandonments and rejections and all the rest of it, but to learn from them, to grow from them, to move on from them. And I think that's really absolutely vital, especially now, because we're collectively carrying such a heavy weight of trauma. And it seems to me that if we can realize that we know it no longer serves us, and it's outlived its purpose, it's got us to here. Now let's find ways, each other together, of releasing it with honor, with honoring and respecting for what it's taught us, but appreciating that carrying that weight does not serve us in moving forward, either personally or together.
Yes, as humanity evolves, and having conversations like this helps those that are just on the brink or the verge of breaking open, right? Yeah. So that they can give more, be more, and for humanity. Because there's a shift there, don't you find? Like once you heal yourself, and then you take a look, You go, well, boy, if I can do that, what else can I do?
Exactly.
We get to step into who we came here to be. And even though we sometimes question it, when we keep on having meetings like this and meeting people, and we're all kind of on the same wavelengths, sort of, and we're all moving forward together, but we don't realize it because there is so much isolation as well. But I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, first of all, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think you raised the point around the word isolation.
Yes.
I call it I love playing with words,
You do,
and
I
and,
love
and
it.
and I sometimes spell isolation
Yes.
ICE dash soul SOUL Asian. In other words, we're turning our souls into ice.
Yes.
It's like this, and when we can melt, then our souls are free.
Yes.
Our hearts are free, our souls are free. And so, isolation is one of those indicators of this journey we've been on over the last period of time,
Yes.
where we've progressively separated ourselves from each other. And, we talk about the internet, we talk about social media, but social media is not social
No.
media. It's not authentic relationship. It can be,
Yes.
but like any technology, it can be used for good or for ill. And it seems to me that, this is the time when so many folks are waking up through all sorts of reasons, that there is so much in my experience. And I've journeyed to more than 80 countries. I've worked with all sorts of folks in war zones and, in palaces and in mud huts and homeless and indigenous folks and so many amazingly wonderful experiences and encounters. And what I've learned is that beliefs divide us, values bring us together. And, values of caring and empathy and kindness and compassion. And I found that across the world. And even when I found I'm in circumstances where I don't speak the same language as folks, I found profound kindness. In war zones, I found profound kindness from homeless people. I was in London a little while ago, and I was in a really busy part of London. I was really distracted. Oh no, it wasn't London. It was Oxford, and I was really distracted. And I was just walking along what I thought was a pedestrian area, and people were looking at me a little bit oddly. And suddenly, this gentleman came up, and I could see that he was homeless. And he said, "Sweetheart," and he called me sweetheart. He said, "Sweetheart, there's a bus behind you." And there was this huge bus behind me.
Oh
And
no.
I'm just walking in front of me. And he was so kind. And he just said, "You better move out of the way."
Yeah.
But in my experience, and I've found this in throughout my life, if we can be open with others, 99 out of 100 times they're open with us. And even if they're not, I would still say, as my mum would always say, choose love. Choose love.
Mm-hmm. And it's because the energy of love goes out before you, really,
Yeah.
you know?
It all energies do. All energies do. We're always transmitters, transducers of energy. And as you know, I think, Rhonda, my work is sort of taking, the appearance of our universe, its energy, matter, and space down to deeper levels of non-physical causation. So I would actually say that, mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They are what we and the whole world are. And I'm talking here about universal consciousness as well as our own personal awareness. So in that regard, we are radiators, we're receivers and transmitters and transducers of consciousness, whether we're aware of it or not. So how we feel, how we think is that. So if I'm fearful, I'm also radiating that. If I'm loving, I'm radiating that. And I know as a scientist that love has a higher frequency than fear. So essentially, when we feel love, that is more effective, if we want to even use that word.
Yeah.
That is more radiative. That is more benevolent and moves further than fear can. But fear does. And so the more we can actually feel love and be in that field of love, and the universe, it seems to me, invites us into that fear of love. It's when we feel separate. For me, the journey is when we feel separate. You talked about isolation. Separation is very lonely. It's very lonely. So this to me is a journey of loneliness when we feel separate, to aloneness when we feel our own individuality, to all oneness when we realize and experience life as unique and inseparable.
Mm-hmm. So well put. So well put. Thank you so much. I'd like to change gears here just a little bit because I'd like you to speak about the film that you produced and sort of what led up to that and why. What was the reason behind it? What was your thoughts and your love behind that? Because it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. We'll put it in the show notes. I'll put the link in the show notes. So do you want to talk to the audience about that?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your kind words about the film because it really was a labour of love. I love films, basically. I love words, and my mum taught me to read when I was 3 years old, and I think it was a defence mechanism, to be honest with you, because by already then I was asking why, and she appreciated there were going to be questions she could answer. So if she taught me how to read, she could go, sweetheart, go and read a book, go and read this, go read that, go read the other. So I think it probably saved her sanity. But no, she taught me to read when I was 3. And I loved films. Back in the day, when we were small, there was our local cinema. There was a sort of a Saturday morning matinee for kids. And she'd take us there. And there were all these adventures. And I just fell in love with film. I could forget that I was sitting in an audience watching. So film has been such a powerful story sharing medium for me. And so when it came to sharing the story, the evidence-based discoveries and discoveries that are turning the old worldview on its head, and into a world instead of meaning and purpose and unity and diversity, and consciousness. I just felt that a film would be a way of sharing that. And this film is only 14 minutes long. And it's called A Radical Guide to Reality, as you know. And it's primarily for young people, 13, 14, 15 years old, but truth seekers of all ages. And it's a seed, Rhonda. It's a seed that, I would love a major filmmaker, streaming platform to come and say, we could really take this and grow it and make it a most incredible series of films. But for me, another key point of it is that we've subtitled it in 20 languages, from Arabic to Ukrainian. And this is not the usual sort of, YouTube algorithm, 80% right and 20% what are they talking about? It's the translation by native speakers of each of those languages. And each of those translators offered their skills free of charge. And I didn't take a penny from the film. So we got a grant to make the film, and all of that money is in the production values, and the rest of it is a labor of love. And to give you an example of that, the wonderful lady who did the Ukrainian translation is a teacher in Kyiv. And given everything that's happening there, she felt that her translating A Radical Guide to Reality for her students is so important, to show them they're not alone and they are empowered and they do belong and they can link up and lift up together. And this is a world where they can stand on the existential reality of belonging. So that, that is so precious and so important to share, because that's what A Radical Guide to Reality is about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how may people find that? I can put it in the notes, but it's on YouTube, is it not?
It is, and we've not spent a penny on marketing. So at the moment, we've got about 25,500 views, and it's on a few other websites. So we've probably got about 30,000 views. And it's free to use. If anybody watches it, they can use it, they can share it. It's free to use. It's in those translations. So we also know, although we've got no metrics for it, we also know that it's already being used in schools in Europe, in Ukraine, in South America, because it's in Spanish and Portuguese, and it's in Japanese and Chinese and all the languages from Arabic, as I say, to Ukrainian. So I suspect that we're probably up to about 40 to 50,000 views, but we're just at the beginning of it. So thank you for sharing it, and please feel free. And anyone who's with us, please feel free to share it, to use it. We have an educational wraparound on our website, which is wholeworld-view.org. So we have a glossary of terms. Yeah. We have the actual script, the transcript, the script. Mm-hmm. We have some focus groups. We have some invitations to experience. And so we've got a wraparound that educators or anyone can use in whatever way they might like to share the film and its message as wise as they would choose.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I really enjoyed it. I've watched it a couple of times because, you're so engrossed the first time that you miss some things. And so I've watched it twice and probably going to watch it again. But the cinematography of it is beautiful.
I was incredibly fortunate. The production team did a superb job. I mean, with the money we had available, they went way over and beyond. Because they too felt it was a service to the greater good, as we all did. So thank you. I really appreciate you enjoying it and sharing it.
Yeah, thank you. And that really speaks to the human spirit, doesn't it? When people recognize what it is that they're working on, and it's part of them as well. And I think it's so wonderful that you have brought a body of work that everyone that was on the production were spending more time usually than they would if it was something that they didn't like.
Absolutely. And everybody did. I mean, it's just so wonderful. And, I also hope that, if a streaming platform comes, and we'll be very, very open, to be able to say to everyone involved in this beautiful seed that, their work goes forward and grows in that sense.
Yes, exactly. So what's next for you? What's next? I mean, I've been following you for a long time. And each time I watch one of your videos or anything, I just a little bit blown away with your work and what you're doing and your background. And so what's next, really?
Well, thank you for asking. And I'm giggling because I have no idea.
You have no idea. Great.
I have no idea. I mean, I could say I'll share a little bit about what I'm doing now. But what I do, and this comes back to what I was sharing earlier, I have total trust in our universe to guide me. And as long as I'm able to hear and listen, as long as I can attune and align with what I'm hearing, as long as I can show up and get out of the way, I can serve. And so for me, it's not like trying to look a year ahead.
Okay.
even, although I get involved in circles of inquiry that want to do that, and I'm happy to do that. But it doesn't worry me personally. I'm far more, what is my choices here and now? How can I make the best choice that I'm capable of serving here and now? And so what I am involved with is a lot of ways in which I can take this body of evidence-based science that's converging with universal, traditional, indigenous, spiritually based traditions and share it in whatever opportunity comes. And a lot of that sharing is with folks who themselves are at the leading edge of their own fields of expertise. So leading economists, leading educators, leading folks who are, in government or at the United Nations or in organizations such as the Club of Rome or others, or presidents of countries that want to make a difference in the world from this place of unity and this grounding in love. So a lot of my work is also involved in how can I help them in their work, and how can we together help folks to link up and lift up together to co-create something that's greater than the sum of the parts and that really can inspire and empower transformational change in the world.
Wow, that's profound. That's incredible. So I just want to go back to where you live. I just wanted to grab this before we have to close up the show. So you live near Stonehenge.
I do. I do. I live in the sort of southwest, as it were, of England, about 45 minutes north of Stonehenge, which I guess most folks know. But I actually live 10 minutes north of another incredible ancient monumental landscape called Avebury, Avebury. And the two are part actually of an overall World Heritage Site, UNESCO World Heritage Site. And they are my heart. They are my place, my place of essentially homecoming. And I've lived here for more than 25 years now and just love this. So this ancient wisdom, I was talking to somebody the other day, these sacred landscapes, we know as an archaeologist, among other hats, we know these are landscapes of sacredness that go back at least 8,000 years. So in a way, we're all indigenous, and for me, I am indigenous to this sacred place. But then for me, everywhere's sacred. So but they're very special. They're very special places.
Are you sensitive to the energies that are around? And that's what I was interested too in knowing. Some people are very sensitive to those energies and others not so much. And I just wondered if you resonated with the energies because they're on fault lines, right?
Not so much, but I mean, we could have a whole nother section of
Yes,
a whole nother session
about
of this. Yeah. Absolutely. But, obviously fault lines are very energetic because of the electromagnetism that plays through them and the water often that plays through them. But yes, I've been sensitive to energies all my life. So for the last 35, 40 years, possibly, part of my work, and I have written about it quite a lot and shared about it quite a lot, has been serving planetary healing. Because, of course, as human beings, we've talked about the traumas of separation and our behaviors that come from that. So I've worked across the world with ancient sites for 3-4 decades now, but also healing where there have been traumas actually imprinted in the land, whether it's a battlefield or place of conflict or dysfunctional energies that aren't flowing, that aren't easy. So I've been doing that work as a planetary healer for, I think it is around 40 years now.
Wonderful. Yes, I'm very sensitive to all of that.
Are you?
Yes, very sensitive to that. I feel it in my body, sometimes in my head, and I love it. I love that. I love being connected at that level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just love it. So It's been such a joy to be in your company and to have these conversations with you. For me, it's monumental to have someone that's had the experience that you've had and then come on my show and share it with my audience. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I've loved being together with you and your community, and thank you for the work that you do, Rhonda, and all the communities that are now, really around the world, forming circles of circles of circles, and just coming together and supporting each other and helping each other and inviting each other to journey on together, because this is such a momentous time of choice, of collective choice and personal choice. So thank you for all that you do.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's sort of a conversation that we could just continue for hours. It's one of those, we have to come to an end, but it's one of those conversations that I could just sit and listen to all your experience and all the teachings that you have, because you bring a plethora of information, you know. So maybe one day we can have a second show so that we can dive a little bit more deeper. It'd be wonderful.
I'd love that. I'd love that. And maybe that second show is about ancient wisdom and how our ancestors had this deeply profound, as you were saying earlier, and our indigenous brothers and sisters still do have that deep connection with our planetary mother, um, with Mother Gaia. I mean, that's a whole conversation as
It's a
well,
whole
which
thing.
I'd love to have.
Yes, and I'd have to study up for sure. Which is fantastic because I really love learning more about what I don't know. That's what I'm here to do. So, and it also raises my consciousness as well. So I just love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening and being part of the journey with Nature of Consciousness, your host, Rhonda Grant. Theme song is composed and performed by John Park Wheeler.